Welcome to Between Authors. I'm your host, author Adrian Lopez. What is it that excites us as a reader? It's finding that book or author that you may never have heard of, sort of like the treasure hunt as a reader. The goal for my podcast is to bring to you those books or authors that you may never have found, but may be the treasure you've been searching for all along. Today on episode 33, I bring to you author Ellie Evers. We're going to discuss a little bit about who she is, what she's published, maybe what she's working on, and what her plans are for the future. Welcome to the show, Ellie.
Hi, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely happy to have you here today. Why don't you begin by giving the viewers a little introduction to you?
My name is Allie Evers. I live in Montana. It's extremely cold here right now. I work in IT right now, and I'm actually kind of getting ready to transition into digital design because that's it's a little more creative path on top of already doing the writing and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm just super happy to be here, and I'm excited to get started.
Yeah. Why don't you, one of the things I always like to ask the guests is influences, right?
hmm
And I never want any of you guys to box it into books and authors, right? Because a lot of different things can influence you creatively. So why don't you let us know or give us kind of an idea of what does creatively influence you? And it can be anything.
there's I just like most art forms in general. I'm very influenced by music. I really like some of kind of the older acid rock bands like Donovan and Cream, and a lot of the imagery that those artists put in there into their music. I put into my books. I like books that seem a little trippy sometimes. I do. I like that. I like disorientation in
Yeah.
in special doses because sometimes it can get overwhelming. And then author, I mean, as far as actual, physical artists go, I really also like expressionists. So like, I guess he'd be considered abstract, but like Kandinsky is one of my favorites, and I
Mhm.
like Pollock. I like abstract, like almost as far as you can go with abstract art. I really do enjoy it.
Yeah.
I like things that make you feel a little disoriented.
And it's interesting, and it really is why I asked the question, right? Because
hmm
it is that difference of the foundation for all the writers or authors, right? Where
hmm
where you're coming from in terms of what does influence you, because it's not going to be the same no matter if everybody's writing in the same genre. It's that different
No.
foundation that you're bringing in, right? And I'm always
Yeah.
curious to hear what that is because it ranges. It really does. It's a wide
hmm
variety of range of influences that you really do hear. Um, so let's talk about your book. I believe it's called Taken
Okay.
by the Wisp,
Yes.
and this video is going to air a little bit later, but as of when we're recording it, it just released. It just came out. So why don't you give the viewers a little idea of what the book is about?
So the book is about three lifelong friends. They're all in their early 30s, and they are on a backpacking trip through the Cascades of Oregon. And some very kind of trippy stuff starts to happen to them, and they end up all of them getting sucked into a different world. But each book is each friend's journey. So the first book focuses on a girl named Yira, and she gets pulled into this world. She kind of gets attacked immediately, and then she finds someone to help her along her journey and to help her find her friends and hopefully help her get out of this crazy, crazy world. And it's a romance. It's a monster romance. He is a creature. Um, it's called a Vakai, and I found this creature, which I couldn't actually find a physical descriptor for in Finnish folklore. And
Hmm.
the creatures in Finnish folklore are actually guardians to the lands that they're spelled to. So I put all those characteristics in his character. So I did a hard deep dive into Finnish folklore to get a lot of the characters in this book because I wanted them to kind of be on theme. And yeah, it's a love story. It's got a happily ever after, and then each book is going to be each girl's story, and they are spicy and funny, and um, they really kind of, they're also about the strength of friendship and just the power of being a woman, I guess.
Hmm. Is this is planned as a trilogy, or how many books will this be?
I'm pretty sure 3, but there is another 2 people that show up in the first book that I kind of want to either do a novella for or another full book. So 3 for sure, possibly 4.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the things that is something that we kind of talk a lot about on this podcast is
Hmm.
are those characters that kind of pop in and kind of push their way in and say, look, I'm a much bigger part of the story than you originally planned.
Yeah.
And,
And then they become, oh,
yeah,
sorry, I was gonna say, then they
no,
become like fan favorites, and then you
yeah,
have to do something with them.
yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy because, it's, one of the things I've talked about before in the podcast was, as you're writing that story and kind of letting it organically just go where it wants to go,
Hmm.
and the correlation with just everyday life in general, because in the book, your characters have experiences, obstacles, challenges that they're either going to grow from or, repeat the same kind of thing. And
Hmm.
that's why you get these things because somebody, just like in regular life, somebody comes in your life that you didn't expect, right? It completely changes maybe the direction or something's going to
Hmm.
happen. And it's kind of weird because I've thought about this and I could be completely off, but I thought about writer's block and I feel that it might be when you're trying to force maybe your storyline or force your outline or maybe
Hmm.
what your original expectation was for a story instead of really
Uh,
just letting it go.
I've found an interesting hack with writer's block, and it sucks because you have to go back, so you have to fix everything. But switching the viewpoint. So I usually write in first person, but I can get over writer's block a little bit if I go to third. I have to go back and fix everything, but zooming out for some reason, I don't know why, but it helps me get through it. But then you have to
Yeah,
fix everything.
that's interesting. I've never heard that before. Nobody had mentioned that. That's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
Um, so let's talk a little bit more about this book in general, right?
sure.
So um, I know you talked about doing some research on Finnish folklore
Mhm.
because of the
Yes.
character. Was there any other research you did for the book outside of that? Was there anything else that you kind of brought into it?
Well, I have a big background in Greek mythology because I was one of those weirdos that just fell in love with Greek mythology. So the land I created is kind of a hodgepodge of almost all mythological creatures. So things can show up from Middle Eastern mythology, things can show up from Greek mythology. And so other than Greek, Roman, and some kind of Nordic mythologies, I had to do research on a lot of the other ones. So when I went into Finnish and Celtic, and I looked up a lot of stuff for it. And then I also went really deep into name pronunciation because I gave the main character Arik, I gave him a Finnish name. And then I gave another character a Finnish name, and his name is Khalid. And I went to like 4 different sites to try to get because they're spelled so crazy.
Yeah,
So I went to 4 different pronunciation sites to make sure I was able to say them right because that's a pet peeve of mine. People that write these names and then they don't know how to say them per the nationality that they're part of.
yeah. Did in the book, do you do anything where you're giving the pronunciation at the time, or do you have it later, or
I don't. I
you
should.
don't?
It's a really short, little, simple book, and the names are pretty short. They're just like Kaliv is spelled Kalieve or VE, and so I'm assuming some people are just like say it like Kelvy, but in their head it's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I
I was
didn't do it.
curious because um, I'm not sure. I've seen it done, either way,
Mhm.
and I was just curious how you did do that on that side. But
I didn't.
I don't
I
think
should
there is
have.
a right or wrong way on
Yeah.
to do it. So I think you're fine on that side. Um, so in the book, in this specific book,
Mhm.
did you have a favorite scene from the book?
Yeah, I did. I got to write this scene where the main character Yura, it's like her third night being in this crazy world, having met this guy Arik, who in her head she calls a giant ghost demon because it's kind of what he looks like. And she gets woken up in the middle of the night and by this like kind of rhythmic lilting singing, and she meets Wood Sprite, who's one of Aric's friends. And at the time, Arik can't communicate with her because he can only speak telepathically. He's never needed language, so he doesn't know how to speak to her, and she doesn't have the ability to do so. So she meets this sprite who can actually speak to her, and he's like, this chick is stressed out, like I'm gonna give her some mead, and she just gets wasted. Like she just gets really drunk with this sprite, and it was such a funny scene to write because everything was a little serious up to that point. So it was this, and I mean, if you've seen any of my TikToks, like I lean pretty heavy on comedy as much as I can. So it was really, it was fun to write, to just be able to do some straight physical comedy in the book.
Yeah, that sounds great. And
Oh,
I can imagine if you are pretty, like you said, it's very dramatic or very serious up to a point.
yeah.
Those little breaks are kind of great to give you that, just that little bit of a pushback, so you kind of get out of that
Hmm.
mood for a second. So I can imagine
Yeah,
that would have been a fun scene.
and then trying to figure out how to like type out things the way a drunk person would say them, and then Grammarly just yelling at you like that's not that word, like that's not the point.
Yeah.
She's wasted, she can't say words.
On the opposite side of that, was there a hard scene in this book?
I I had a lot of hard scenes. I think the hardest part was kind of wrapping up how they figure out. So, I mean, spoiler, eventually all the friends are going to see each other in the end of this, so it's pretty obvious, but how they figure out where one of the friends is, because in the book they find one of them. And kind of figuring out the conduit to how they were going to find her took me a lot of time. And it's pretty simple in the book, and it's when you read it, you're like, it took her this long to figure out how to get these people here, but it did. I was blocked for like 2 months trying to figure out how they were going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I
it
got there.
happens. I mean, you sometimes when you're looking at something over and over and over again, and sometimes it is the simplest thing. You're like, I'm just not
Yep.
seeing it. It's just not coming through.
Yep.
This is your first published work, right?
Hmm.
Correct. So one of the questions I have sometimes is, did you find the way you write changed at all after doing this, right? And what I mean by that is not necessarily your style, but
Hmm.
maybe how you approach writing, through the editing process or through the reworks and stuff. Did you find that the way you kind of write on that side of it changed after doing this?
It did. It changed a ton. This was my first. I'd only written short stories up to this point. Nothing ever published. I always kind of wrote on and off since high school. I didn't go to college. All my stuff is self-taught. So I'm just kind of a bibliophile, and I've always been a writer. I also have dyslexia, so my spelling is absolutely horrific. But I don't know. It was hold on one sec. I got lost. Um, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I got lost.
Yeah, no worries. Basically, if you're the way you write changed as you
Oh
were
yeah.
writing this, and you said it had, yeah,
Oh, it was a crazy amount between this book, and I'm halfway through the second book. Just learning so much. I bought Pro Writing Aid, and I let that kind of go through my document. And I really was this book. I am able to check myself a lot more with like repeated words, and I learned a lot more about sentence structure. And then I sent my book off to an editor, and she did a bunch of stuff, and I really tried to absorb the things she did and some of the things that she put in her notes. And the second book is coming out easier than the first in some ways and harder in others, but my writing has, I think it's improved massively from the first book to the book that will be coming out hopefully pretty soon.
yeah. I mean, and again, that's an important point because
Hmm.
you are just going to get better, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like writing's like anything. The more you practice it, the better you get, right? So,
Hmm.
it's just again for a lot of people to not get down or discouraged, when they're starting to write and doing early stuff, it'll just get
Yeah.
better. It's just automatically going to get better the more you do it.
Yeah. Especially with something so big. I mean, you're a novelist, you know that you'll go through chapters and you'll be like, gosh, I used that sentence a lot or that descriptor a lot, once you start
Yeah.
rereading. And so
Yeah.
I'm trying to avoid catching that in the second book as much as I
Yeah.
did that in the first book.
And it's bound to happen because you're not writing
Yeah.
in one city, right? You're writing,
No.
I found myself, I mean, I don't know if you did it on a structure, but
Hmm.
the way my mind thinks is it's not really structured. It is structured in my head, but it's not
Hmm.
structured when I do it, right? So
Yeah.
I found myself, what I kind of did is I named chapters, just gave it a name, and that was kind of like my outline for what I wanted to accomplish. But I
Hmm.
found myself, writing like chapter 18, going back to writing chapter 5, because
Oh
it's just
gosh.
as I saw it, certain things how I wanted to build it through.
Hmm.
So, at some points you're chronologically going through, right? You're just
Yep.
knocking out. But there's some things where I knew where I wanted to be,
Hmm.
and I knew I needed to get there, but where I was not going to be there yet, right? So as you go back, you're like, okay, I'm building this into where I wanted to be, and that's what's going to happen, right? Because you're not writing these things definitely in one sitting. You're not writing it really that close together, so you're not going to remember how you wrote that thing or
No.
those things. So that, like you said, when you go back, you're like, wait a minute, I said this
Yeah.
way too many times as I
So
was
many
writing it.
times.
Yeah. So you are, like I said, you are writing right now, book two. Um,
Hmm.
so one of my questions basically usually is, what are you currently working on? So book two, and then what is your goal for maybe after book two is released? Book three, would it be within the year? Are you looking more towards next year?
I'm gonna try to do it this year. We'll see, because I also got inspired to write a contemporary romance that I've had in my head for a long, long time called Elder Emo. But but I don't. I kind of want to work them tandemly, but I can't, like, it's really hard for my brain to do that. I don't. It's hard for me to split things. Like, I want to finish one and then I want to finish the other. So I might work on that on the side if I can wrap my head around it.
Yeah. Um,
Some people can do four things at once. I don't know how they do that.
yeah. I have like three or four different ones going on, but it's
I'm
I just
thoroughly
I can compartmentalize them
impressed.
separately. So it works. I mean, it works for me, but I'm not saying it's the
Mhm.
easiest or the right way to do it. But
Well, I think it's just
so let
how
me
your
ask
head
you this.
works.
Let me ask you this. In terms of genres, I know what you're writing
Mhm.
in. You're saying you want to do a romance that you have a
Yeah.
story for. Are there any other
Mhm.
genres that at some point that maybe you really enjoy that you would like to attempt at some point, or things that you maybe have thought of, or something maybe just kind of mixing into what you're doing now?
Probably. I should have mentioned his name, but I'm a massive Ray Bradbury fan. I mean, my dad gave me a Ray Bradbury book the first time when I was like 9 years old, and Something Wicked This Way Comes. And
Yeah,
I love him. I love sci-fi, and I would eventually like to do something in the sci-fi realm, something probably kind of haunting. Then I really like kind of old. Um, I had an idea about like a kind of a succubus story set, during the witch trials, but I've got a lot of things rolling around up there. I have an overactive imagination, but for sure, just to kind of go back to the genre that I first fell in love with reading, which is sci-fi, I'd love to do something there.
yeah, that's great. Um, yeah, I mean, I love Bradbury too. I mean, my uncle was a traditional bookbinder, so he
Oh,
actually used to
cool.
build books from scratch. Studied how to do it from somebody, and up until when he passed, he did that. I mean, he could just build a
That's so
book.
awesome.
It was amazing when he used to do that. But he loved books, right? He loved books and
Hmm.
reading. He was the one that really got me into everything, right? And it's kind of what gave me my foundation, which is all over the place, basically, because he was, right? I mean, he
Yeah.
got me into Japanese culture with samurais
Hmm.
and all the old stories. Um, my original book trilogy that got me into really reading was the Tomoe Gozen series by Jessica Mendes Helmanson. And
Okay.
she took traditional Japanese folklore and stories and basically threw in magic, fantasy, demons, everything else into it. And it's just
I
an
love that.
amazing trilogy for anybody that's never read it. Kind of hard to
Mhm.
find now because I think it was back in the 80s or something, but it's
Yeah.
it was just an amazing thing. And that's again, it goes back to when you have that, you know, really diverse foundation, it really opens up a lot of stuff for you to do. Horror is something I absolutely love,
Mhm.
um, only because luckily I'm old enough where I have the classic Universal, the Hammer Studios from the 70s, and all the newer stuff.
Mhm.
But it gives you all that stuff to pull from, right? And like you said, you have a great foundation in terms of the old acid bands and Bradbury
Mhm.
sci-fi and all that stuff. It really gives you a good foundation to pull from that's much more diverse than maybe a lot of other people are pulling from, right? And it gives
Yeah.
you not only like you're saying that overactive imagination, it really isn't. You
Yeah.
just have a lot of stuff in there that
Yeah.
that
I
you can
do.
pull from that were amazing imagination, creatively things that were done previously.
Yeah. Yeah, another genre I really love, is just, like, anything really pulpy. I love, like, grindhouse stuff, and I think I've read a couple of pulp novels, and I love them. Their style's really hard to get into, but I would love to do something that was just, like, pure, fun, gritty pulp.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's when you read some of those old detective novels or stuff, and they have
Yep.
that cadence that they kind of speak in, and the writing
Mhm.
goes in it, right? It's
Yep.
it catches you, it draws you in as you're reading it, but it's almost impossible to try to figure out how to do it because that was a complete style at the point. But
Yep.
it really is quite, it's artistic the way it's kind of written out and the way they speak through some of those old gumshoe detective stories. And
Mhm.
when you see the old movies, the black and white movies, or like you said, some of the little books, um, it's great. I mean, I love them.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that would be another fun even if I could do a little pulp novella somehow, I would love to try and tackle that genre. I think it would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things, and again, I like the way you did, kind of like mixing all the different folklore in your story for the
Mhm.
world. But one
Yeah.
of the things I always appreciate, um, just across the board artistically, right? And I'm not just talking about writing, I'm
Mhm.
talking about movies, music, everything, is when people do it a different way, right? When they come from a
Mhm.
different angle, a different point of view, and it's not the usual, right? It's not the same thing that you see. And I'm not saying that's bad, right? I'm
No.
never saying it's bad, but when I wrote the werewolf book, I didn't want the werewolf book to be, from a curse. I didn't want it to have a full moon. I didn't want it to be from a bite. I want it
Yeah.
different, right? I want something different that you haven't
Yeah.
seen. And I always appreciate that from anybody, right? From any time artistically when they come from a different point of view, when movies in general just change it on you because after a while it's too formulaic and you kind of like, oh, I know what's going to happen. And when they give you
Yeah.
that switch, you're like, I just love this. It might not be the best thing I've ever seen, but I just love the fact that they did that little different, right?
No, I do too, and for someone because I consume a lot of romance, and I really appreciate when people in that genre change things because that genre in particular is very formulaic, and so it's really interesting to find authors that decide to just do some things a little bit differently.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, one of the things after you start doing this and you notice almost everybody's book is a category and then probably several subcategories, right? So,
Yep.
if you're fantasy, you may have some thriller in there, you may have some horror in there, you may have a
Mhm.
bunch of different things in there. And, that's really where you can kind of take that and take that different direction where
Mhm.
you kind of pull some of those other subcategories that your storyline is in. and just take it that
Yeah.
way, right? Lean a little heavier in that. And it's always so refreshing to me when you see that. It's just I love it. I absolutely love when there's a different point of view and it's just
Yeah.
not the same thing that you
Oh
um
yeah, 100%. I tried to do some trope busting in my book, like I said, because romance is so tropey, and it's a spoiler for it, but like four people have read it, so whatever. Um, but I made the main character. She starts to kind of get powers as this moves on. Not a lot of powers, but something starts to happen to her. And so I set it up in a way that you think she's going to defeat the big bad because she's going to become powerful, and she doesn't. She literally reasons her way out of it. She's just like, I'm smarter than all of you. This is really stupid. Why are you doing this? Like
yeah.
that was a really fun scene to write too. Just like it was kind of like someone gave like their big bad villain speech, and as they're giving it, she's breaking it apart. She's like, this person is not smart. Like this plan's gonna fall apart the second it's set in motion, and I'm just gonna break it apart. So that was fun
That's
to write.
great because yeah,
Yeah.
usually like you said, you're going to see they're going to get stronger and stronger, or they just do something to be able to win.
Yeah,
And yeah,
or the guy's gonna save her.
yeah.
But
So
no, she's just
that was
no.
another question,
Yeah.
kind of for me was, are all your books novellas going to be female main character heavy, or are you plan on doing maybe a couple different points of view on that side?
So the first book I did is a dual point of view. You get him and her. And so all of them are going to be set up that way. I would like to do eventually. I would kind of like to do an ensemble book, which I think would be really fun. Kind of, I don't know, kind of in vein of like the Shadow and Bone spinoff, like where that was a
Hmm.
massive ensemble cast, and it's kind of a heist book. I really enjoy those kinds of books. Or kind of like Game of Thrones, but absolutely not like Game of thrones because no one can write that book other than the person that should be writing it right now.
Uh, yeah, I know.
Sorry, I had to take a dig at George R. R. He just needs to finish them.
I know. I agree with you. I'm still upset with the last season too. I mean, I came in late. I came in late to purposely
Oh,
just be able to binge everything, and yeah, didn't work out, right?
no, no, it was. We all know how disappointing it was, but
Yeah,
it still hurts. Like I don't
yeah.
even want to rewatch it now because it still hurts.
Yeah, the reason I had asked you about that is, again, I come from a family that's all sisters and all nieces, right?
Oh,
So
cool.
I like, I did a children's book that's dedicated to the memory of my daughter because we lost her during pregnancy, but I plan
Oh.
on doing other children's books, right? And
Hmm.
one of my goals for that is that, I have one I just released the cover today on TikTok for, but all of them I plan on the sister being the one that kind of is the hero of the book, right? And
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily have to be the older sister. In this one, it's the younger sister, but she like takes the lead and says, I'll take care of it. Let me
Hmm.
do this." And that's something I just want to do because again, you you do now have a lot more stronger female lead characters and role models for it, but it's always been something that was not enough of, right? And you want to be able to have those role models and characters for them to be able to look up to and not have to expect where it's the male that comes in and saves the day or
Yeah.
they need somebody to do it. So that's why I asked you that question because that's one of the things I really plan on doing. Not necessarily in my horror novels, but I will do
Hmm.
that on some of them as well. But on the children's, I really do want to take it to where it's always the female character that kind of does that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I love that more female oriented characters are really coming to the forefront. I mean, you have the whole Sarah J. Maas universe that's just everywhere now. And I read all the books and I'm really looking forward to Crescent City. The one thing I think in romance and uh fantasy that could be changed a little bit is like the descriptors of the female main characters. They all seem to be tiny. They all have like light brown hair. They all have blue eyes. Like I really want to see some, you know, people of color main characters and some bodily diverse main characters in fantasy and romance. And it's getting there, but it's not,
Yeah.
it's not there yet.
Unfortunately, it's always kind of slow to get
Yeah.
to these transitions that you really need. Again, the
Yeah.
good thing is that you do see the transition going, but as always, you would want it to go a lot quicker on that side. I just interviewed Angela Sylvain the other night, which is
Hmm.
one of our authors, co-authors on TikTok, and she writes all horror, basically, right? And
Hmm.
one of the things we kind of agreed on was because we're both huge horror fans, just in general
Yeah.
for everything, and it was interesting that that's really the genre that took the lead with female main characters, right? Because they have all the final girls, which are always the
They
ones that
do.
win at the end, right? And it's the one
Hmm.
genre that has taken the lead in that, right? It's always
Yeah.
that female main character that kind of
That
finishes
gets
it
out
off, right?
alive.
Unfortunately, there's always, you know, 13 follow-up movies that come with it, but
Yeah.
it's always that female, and it's the one genre that really led in that and doesn't apologize for it, right? It's like this is what it is. It's going to be the female character that's going to win in the end for this one. And
That's so true.
I think again, being that horror is probably my primary
Hmm.
background, and kind of like I said, what I want to do because my sisters and nieces, it's just
Hmm.
something I really kind of appreciate when I do see a lot more of that character wise in anything, right? Books, movies, or whatever.
So I actually just listened to something really interesting about horror movies because I don't watch a ton of them. I can do some, but some of them will give me a panic attack. But um I just listened to this podcast that was talking about horror movies and talking about the different ways they're made per country and the different messages that each country is trying to say. Um, I don't. You probably watched it. There was this great. I think it was a German movie, and it was about. I don't know. I wish I had the name, but they talked about like the different like moral structures in each country because horror movies are always trying to say something about a moral structure and give you a
Yeah,
lesson somewhat. And the way Americans do it, and like the way Germans do it, and the way the Italians do it is so different, but they also end up being females that win at the end.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it was a
it's
really
very
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because even both of us didn't really think of it until we were talking about it, right? We go, wait a minute,
Hmm.
it is the genre that's actually kind of taken the lead
Yeah.
or owns it, right? They just like
Hmm.
this is what we're doing and we're gonna stick with it, which is great. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting the way the different countries approach any of these things, right? Again, I have a huge background of Japanese cinema. I
That's
absolutely
great.
love Japanese cinema, but the
Hmm.
classic cinema, right? I do love the samurai movies as well, but their actual dramas from the 30s and 40s and stuff are some of the most beautiful movies ever made, right? And some of the
Hmm.
saddest movies too. They don't mess around when they do their
Oh, they
movies.
don't mess around. I
Now,
really like Korean cinema a lot. I was a big
yeah,
Bong Joon-ho fan, like back in the day, like when he did The Host and all that. I've been watching him for a really long time, and then I watched Old Boy, which just wrecked me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I
That's
need
a
to get
great
more into
one.
Japanese. It is a great one, but
Yeah, Japanese.
it'll
I
make
mean, if you
me get
watch,
into Japanese.
if you stay away from, and I'm not necessarily saying you have to, because the samurai ones
Hmm.
are also really well made period pieces. They're not
Hmm.
necessarily just action movies. But when you see some of the other ones, they're just amazing movies, right? There's one movie
Hmm.
called Ikiru, which is probably the saddest movie ever because it's an older gentleman that finds out he's dying, right? He doesn't tell his family, and there's a younger lady that works at the office, and they just become friends, and he's kind of helping her, and the family's thinking he's being dumb, and he wants to try to marry her, and they're just constantly after him, and he's dying. He's like, this is a good younger lady. Let me help her. But he doesn't tell this family that he's dying.
Oh
It's
gosh.
one of the saddest movies to watch. You're
Breaks
like,
your heart. Oh
geez,
my
just
gosh.
let up a little. Just give me a break here on these movies. But yeah, the Japanese cinema and some of the other Asian ones as well. One
Hmm.
of the things that I found after hundreds and hundreds of movies is they don't necessarily like happy endings, right? There's never really
No,
a happy ending in any of their movies, right? Even
no.
when you win, you basically lose because you wind up like losing everything else in the process. And it's just, it was always a,
Yeah.
again, I appreciate that interesting take. There is really no happy ending, right? You suffered through all this and you got through it, right? Your happy ending is
Mhm.
that you made it through, but all that stuff you went through was just like one brick after another hitting you in the process.
That's so true. I got into the like the late 2000s kind of kung fu movies. So like Hero with Jet Li is
Yeah,
one of my favorite movies. I love that
yeah,
movie so much. And it's so true because he goes through all of this and he fights all of these people and they're the most beautiful fight scenes you've ever seen in your life. But then it ends and I guess China wins in the end of that movie, but that's about it. That's the only
yeah,
person that wins.
yeah, and that's the way they're written. I mean, that's
Hmm.
basically their formula for their cinema.
Yeah.
And
It's so beautiful.
again, it's a great take because a
Hmm.
lot of times people try to force the happy ending, right? And again, sometimes you're like, how did this how did this work? But when you start taking that out of the equation, like you don't need that to happen, right? And but
Yeah.
it depends on your audience. Does your audience understand that, right? Does your audience
Hmm.
understand that side of it? But there is an audience for it, right? And it always goes back to your audience will find you and your voice. But yeah, it's just an interesting take on the different cultures and how they approach these things.
Yeah, it's a really interesting deep dive into just seeing how other people experience media in general. But
Yep.
I mean, you think about books like American Psycho and how that thing ended, and there was obviously a market for it because it became a movie, but that book turned my stomach so much.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I got through the movie, but I read it. I
No.
don't know why I read it, but I did.
Um, yeah. I mean, it's just it's interesting. I love talking about movies in general and the writing in these stories because like I said, if you ever get a chance, watch some of the old Kurosawa Japanese movies.
Hmm.
Just beautiful, beautiful movies. I mean, I can never say enough about them. I absolutely love them. I mean, I watch so much sometimes that I never did do it, but I was like, I really should just learn Japanese because it was harder and harder to find anything with subtitles because I
Oh
had watched so
man,
much. I was like, I can't even find the movies anymore to be able to watch these things.
yeah. I mean, there's some pretty good dubbing now. I'm
Yeah,
hoping maybe a streaming service will pick them up and do like a legit dubbing. That would be a good way to do it.
yeah.
But I don't know. I know
But
I need to read your book. Is it, but do you have an audio version by any chance?
I don't yet.
Okay.
It's something I thought about, but
Hmm.
as you're doing this, you go, okay, that's a cost. I don't know if I'm ready for it yet because
It's a
I'm
lot.
writing my zombie book right now.
Hmm.
Actually, I have like three things planned for this year.
Oh,
So,
nice.
the audio book would have to probably be after, but I have my zombie one I'm writing now. I have book two for the werewolf
Hmm.
storyline. And then I'm doing a short story collection of horror stories as well. That and that's the thing. I have everything's like 75% written. So I just need to see
Yeah.
which one I'm gonna finish first and put it through and kind of go that way. But yeah, I don't have an audiobook currently.
Okay. Well, I'll just add the physical book to my TBR because I'm starting to do like audio indie audio reviews. Like I'm going to do a little segment on my page where I just listen to some independent authors' audio books just to see how they turn out and to give them a review and to give them a listen because that's exposure is the best thing you can do for indies.
Yeah, I actually it was something I thought about starting to do this year because I have a long commute now going to work where I didn't in the past. So I
Hmm.
have, round trip, it's sometimes 3 to 4 hours
Oh
of my
gosh.
commute, right? So I was like, I might start doing this to get through some other stuff, when they're available. But
Oh, it's a
yeah, I
fantastic
mean,
way to
I
do it.
absolutely loved our conversation today. This was great,
Oh,
and
good.
I do want to remind the viewers that I will have all of Allie's links down below in the description of the video, website, links to her book, socials, whatever she wants to put down there for you to find her. Um, absolutely would like you to come back on when book 2 comes out so we can go over that
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
discuss that as well. And again, for the viewers, leave us a comment. If you have a question for either of us, or just let us know how you enjoyed the episode. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications to miss all these amazing indie authors coming up. And again, I just want to thank you, Ellie, for coming on. I truly did enjoy this.
Yeah, well, and if you ever just want to have a nerd chat online, we can do that too.
It works for me.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you, viewers,
Yeah.
for watching. Goodbye.
Bye.